Hi and welcome to LCAL Low Carb Ancestral Living with Pim Johnson. Today I have someone who might be familiar to a lot of you with me. His name is Harry Serpanos and he's been on my YouTube channel before. And if you're listening to the podcast version, you might want to head over there because he has a lot of interesting stuff going on. I would say that Harry is a bit of a science nerd. He likes to read a lot and learn a lot about pretty much everything that he reads about, so that's why I like to pick his brain. And today I have him here because he's, no matter what the problem is, he always says take some taurine. So taurine is the new magnesium, the new vitamin D3, and I want to know all about it. So welcome to the show, Harry.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. So I'm just wondering, how did you get into taurine at all? Because a couple of years ago, I'm not sure that you really had started looking into it. And how did you come across that?
Well, I actually initially got in this is even before I started my YouTube channel or anything, but I didn't get it. Even though I got into it, I thought that at the time that let me just establish myself, as a YouTuber, as, doing stuff like that, without going too deep into all this sort of stuff. And I've sort of viewed it, let's progress. Let's look at the, so I did a lot of initial videos with Bart doing on different subject matters, whether it was methylation, whether it was issues like about the ancestral way of eating, the chimps, the savanna chimps and how they change their behavior.
I love that.
In a different environment and going through that sort of, so it was a long sort of, my whole idea was let me build it up from an ancestral way, move it right across and then start going into nuancing it over time about different things. And so while I had, as I've shown people on my live streams, all these videos that I have to make, it's just one after another. It's just pages. It's just you roll and you can see all these folders and they don't have numbers in front of them. They don't have numbers because only when I start recording something do I put a number in it so I know in which row it is. And so I had that and I said to myself, well, I need to do all these other videos to explain certain things like with the minerals and stuff like that, with magnesium secretion. Well, you only secrete out 120 milligrams. And I go, well, so people understand that you can get more than enough from the meat. Potassium, you only excrete this amount, 192 or whatever. But you get way more from the body. But I wanted to basically give people the idea that meat is important to basically maintain a good level to take in these electrolytes and all that, something that you don't get in low carb or keto because I don't eat enough meat. And that is a problem in it all. But then I wanted to go into the regulatory side of things, but at a later stage. I didn't want to go immediately. I wanted to cover all these other points and then bring this thing because, I've been using this method. I started using it for cardiovascular disease. As you know, about 12 years ago, I had double bypass surgery. So that was in my old kibble days. But just a short thing. Is I started looking at, well, what sort of nutrients really help a hypoxic environment or really help an environment like the heart inflammation? And I started realizing that taurine played a very important role. So even when you have, like after a stroke or after a heart attack, you have blood perfusion, you can have a lot of oxidative stress that can actually happen. Well, taurine, if you've got sufficient amount in the system, it actually mitigates that. And then I started reading more on taurine that basically it prevents left ventricular hypertrophy. So people that are actually doing cardio, severe cardio, especially athletes and all that drop dead. You notice them all the time, kibble eating. And kibble eating is really bad because it burns through methyl donors. It burns through sulfur. It reduces sulfur. And taurine is a sulfur amino acid, It's not a regular it's not like the other amino acids. We call it a sulfur amino acid, but it's not really a sulfur amino acid in a sense. It's sort of it's called an amino sulfonic acid. So it's an organic, an organic sulfur. That's what it is. We'll get to that
for lay people, can you just explain? Can you just explain the importance of sulfur? Why we are interested in the sulfur on the amino acids? or on taurine specifically?
Sulfur can play a lot of roles in the body. It has antioxidant effects. It can reduce oxidative stress, inflammation in the body. It also basically plays an important roles in terms of membrane. Well, this specific sulfur does have, and it's been proven in science that this is mechanistic studies showing that it actually has membrane stability. It plays a role in detoxification, which I've talked about on my live streams constantly. That's probably the one thing that I've talked mostly about, taurine in the liver, how with bile salts it conjugates with bile and actually improves the type of bile. The one you get from cysteine, on the other hand, isn't as effective. Even in breast milk, you get massive concentrations of taurine specifically for conjugation, because it also has a sterilizing effect of the small intestine, and a child usually has a leaky gut. So it's really important to basically control pathogens within the actual gut lining for that child, and taurine plays an important role there. I've done a number of videos discussing about taurine's importance to the gut and the stomach acidity. But I'll go over the others. The other one is, these are the key ones. The antioxidant effect, obviously, we've discussed that. And that is antioxidant both in cells and in organelles like mitochondria. It is an osmoregulator. That is its original thing. Actually, its most ancestral purpose in all cellular life has been an osmolytic regulator. That means it regulates fluids. Okay?
Yep.
So it also maintains, for us and most other animals, calcium homeostasis. So when people consume more foods high in taurine, what they actually notice, that they get a calming effect. It's because basically what it does is it lowers the calcium levels inside your brain cells. It reduces excitation within those brain cells. It's through GABA ray that actually does it, but we don't need to get into the biochemistry, how it does it, the mechanisms. But it basically reduces anxiety. It calms people down. I've actually had ladies that actually are giving like a gram to their children who've got supposedly the OD. Because they're on eating junk, the kids, unfortunately, and they've all basically got all these anxiety. They've got all these basically problems where they can't calm down. They can't, they're hyperactive and, all these sort of conditions which people consider problems. I usually just call it's a meat deficiency. You hear me sometimes on my live streams, so, somebody says, I've got this, so you've got a meat deficiency, eat more meat, because that's how you're going to get more taurine. The highest sources are obviously seafood. Things like crustaceans tend to be even higher. In particular, something like oysters, 100 grams of oysters, which is 3.53 ounces, hopefully I got that right, of oysters has 1.2 grams of taurine, where meat tends to have much lower. So 100 grams or 3.53 ounces will tend to have a slightly lower level. And the reason for that, is because there are, in the general muscle tissue, you have slightly lower concentrations. The areas where ruminant animals, including us humans, the most concentration is basically in the brain, in the kidneys, in the liver, in the heart, and in a number of other organs to varied degrees. The pancreas is quite high as well, and that has an important role there as well in islet cells, so really protecting them, and also able to regenerate them as well. The other thing that is important is in sort of improves glycolysis, and so it will lower blood sugar, but it also has a number of other functions that are very important. the amount of it, from memory, it's about 0.1% or approximate within the human body. Now, that number I found, but it didn't actually say in terms of the total human body or the dry mass or the human body and all that. So it wasn't very clear. So I don't know whether that is basically I think it's the total, including water and everything. So it may seem very little, but it's a powerful molecule that plays an important role. Now, what is it? What are its origins? Its origins are very interesting. I've been doing some research and looking into early life. And so, it's funny. I started from basically trying to save my life by improving my heart to prevent me from dying. And now I've come right back to the beginning of the history of taurine, which is early life on this planet. Why did early life start around vents? The deep vents in the oceans? Well, they vent a whole lot of sulfur. The animals around those, the little crustaceans and all that, have the highest concentrations of any animal species on this planet of taurine, because they need it for the first function that taurine played a role, and that was basically determining and regulating cell pressure in the deep. So that's what its first role was. It was an osmoregulator, regulating cellular pressure. And it's understandable, at such depth, you need to basically be able to prevent the collapse inwards of the actual cell for such pressure within the ocean depths. So that was its first role and then it took other regulatory roles over time as it sort of moved through the evolutionary tree of different species. And as they came out to the surface and actually got onto the land. The key thing, even in our bodies, plays a big role is in regulating things. How does it do that? It regulates what I said earlier, calcium homeostasis. It actually acts like a calcium channel blocker, but not like a blunt instrument like a medication does, but in a much milder and controllable way to regulate, to make sure that you're basically having the right sort of, the right sort of amounts of certain ions, whether they are, potassium, magnesium ions, calcium ions, that they're in the right place. That means that the right concentration is inside the cell to do the functions, because you need a certain level of magnesium ATP to energy production, and for a number of other biological processes within the actual cell, including, as part of, the rough endoplasmic reticulum sort of transcription there. It's providing additional assistance there. Actually, taurine actually plays another role there. It actually plays an antioxidant effect. This is an area, and it also assists in protein folding. The thing that ages you the most, the quickest, and causes more damage is misfolded proteins. It's considered basically the holy grail of anti-aging, to how to prevent anti-aging by reducing misfolded proteins. Well, our little friend taurine actually, prevents misfolded proteins, actually forces the proteins to refold correctly, as they should. That is why it's in there in the endoplasmic reticulum. And
is there like a requirement, a specific amount that we need every day? Or is it just more is better? We'll get into that. We've got a lot to cover. In the general. You better hurry up.
We've got a lot to cover. Yes. Okay. So the thing is, what are the I'll just cover quickly the sources of food. So you've got basically seafood, which is very high. Yep. Eggs are another high source. Red meats are all high. So 100 grams of meat, most meats will give you, if it's freshly slaughtered, it'll be about 200 micrograms of taurine. That's 3.5 approximately, ounces. But supermarket meat will have half of that, only 100. The reason for that is because when it's hung for a number of months, you lose a lot of the fluids. And it's inside the fluids of cells and the cell walls, around the actual, that a lot of these fluids that are basically lost, you lose some of the taurine with it. And that's why it actually reduces by half, depending on how many months it's been hung. Most of the supermarket food has got about half of it. Then if you overcook it and you lose a lot of the fluids, you can even lose more taurine. It's the reason why some people who do have, let's say they've been on a veganurized diet for a very long time, on a plant-based diet, they've got a lot of basically, gut issues and stuff like that. When they try cooked meat, it doesn't really do much for them, supermarket cooked meat. Then they go to raw meat and they go, wow, I feel much better. Well, it's not the raw meat. It's actually the taurine inside. They could just basically cook their meat to death if they wanted to, like Bart does, and actually just take a taurine supplement. So it basically does the same thing, in that regard. So what does taurine do? Well, it actually improves stomach acidity. It suppresses, actually it doesn't only suppress, let's say it takes a baseball bat to H. pylori.
Wait.
We're talking about it's ruthless towards H. pylori. You want to get rid of H. pylori? Forget about antibiotics. Just eat plenty of meat or seafood, and you'll get plenty of taurine, or supplement taurine if you want to really go, jack up the assault against H. pylori. It also will improve stomach acidity. It'll actually increase the stomach acidity. It'll actually force the pH level to much lower levels, down to the 1 or whatever, which means that you will denature your meat properly. You'll end up with, no more foreign proteins. You'll end up with simple amino acids, which you'll be able to absorb through the middle part of your intestine, which you absorb proteins and carbohydrates, but basically you will absorb them without any foreign proteins causing any reactivity to you. It literally breaks down these things, and it reduces. It also helps within the pancreas increase the production of the actual enzymes that are required to deal with, the lipases and all the different enzymes that are involved in breaking down food particles. It also works there. It's a conjugate for bile, so it actually improves bile production in the gallbladder. It also emulsifies bile, which is really important because it prevents bile stones. The reason why people have got bile stones is because they've had a meat deficiency for so many years. They end up with too much concentrated cholesterol in there and not enough emulsification that happens, and the conjugation of the bile that is done by taurine that actually reduces and emulsifies it, and actually it becomes something that actually will flow much better. It also, when it comes from taurine, not cysteine, the type of bile that we produce, it also remains in the gut for longer, which means it cleanses the gut, the small intestine, eliminating the problem of SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It also tends to encourage the greater growth of beneficial bacteria. I've done a video on this. It's called Metabolic, that fixes up, rebalances your gut microbiome. It's again through inflammasome and interleukin 16, and then AMP. It actually re-regulates and actually suppresses two important things in the gut. Histamine and also spermidine. And spermidine actually is fine if it's in your testicles, males, because there you're going to grow,
Hope so.
plenty of sperm. But if it's in your gut, you've got too much spermidine in your gut, what it does is it causes bacterial overgrowth. So what we call SIBO. and a lot of people that have histamine reactions and stuff like that that are complaining, especially on low-carb diets and stuff like that. You hear a lot of them, especially in the keto community. Well, it's actually a meat deficiency. They're not eating enough meat because they prioritise too much, just fat, and they fear meat because of mTOR. We'll get into that as well. But this is the problem in that community, why they have that. But once you get taurine to a certain level of concentration, it re-regulates the entire gut. It does another thing, motility. It regulates motility, gut motility. So how well your gut motility works, that means the peristalsis of your gut, how well that works depends on what the concentration of cellular taurine within those cells are. Because if it has to be there's a certain concentration that is required. It varies between people, I even between rats and many other species. But once you have a certain level, if you're getting enough in your diet, you will be able to regulate. So if let's say your peristalsis is too fast, it'll slow it down. If it's too slow, it'll speed it up. It will actually, and not only that, but it will regulate it according to the foods you eat. So if you need those aminos to go slower through so they can be absorbed and all that because you've had a bigger meal, it will slow it down. If it's got less, well, it can go a bit faster to get the stuff absorbed through the middle part of the intestine, and on you go, whatever's left over that's not absorbed. And that has to do with the protein utilization index, how much of that ends up then in the colon or not. It can vary between. So eggs tend to, some people say, you hear people say constipation about eggs, but they've got no real constipation. You can eat a lot of eggs and you get very little and it takes a long time. Well, simple, because eggs have got a very high utilization level, which is 49% compared to meat, which is 32%. So you have to slow down in order to absorb over a longer period of time those aminos coming from the eggs, So the nice thing about taurine is it is a regulator of peristalsis, of basically, the gut functioning. So it is just magical stuff. You don't need a whole lot of fiber to force enough volume down there to force gravity to push it out, because that's whatever all kibble eaters do. But and there's actually research to show where they've actually deliberately induced in mice, you can't do it to humans, obviously you can experiment on them, they deliberately caused these rats to not be able to function, their gut not to be able to function properly, push stuff through. They give them taurine, it fixes the problem. So if it's too fast, as I said, it'll slow it down. If it's too slow, it'll speed it up. It's a regulator. It is one of all the roles in the body are regulating. So it will regulate, for instance, a number of minerals to achieve mineral homeostasis. So obviously you maintain electroneutrality within the extracellular fluids through the cell membrane. And what it will do is, if it's moving positives or negative ions, it will make sure that the right sort of composition on both sides are, but in the right physiological range as well, which is really important. The other thing is within the tubular lumen of the nephrons within your kidneys, what it will do there, it'll actually control what it gets excreted out or stays in, gets recycled in, and it will regulate that. So that's why it's very important for the kidneys. And usually when I see kidney atrophy, I say you've got a meat deficiency, a taurine deficiency, because taurine plays a very important role in rebuilding kidneys. So my dad had kidney issues, and we reversed it pretty much with taurine. So he's very happy about that, so he didn't have to go under the knife. But a lot of other people who are on kibble diets are not getting enough. It's the thing. Yeah. Now, the reason why I can actually build tissue, build organs, and actually build a lot of tissue and actually maintain tissue, which is really important. So as you age, you atrophy far more. Other things that it does, it actually plays a role as a neuro sort of transmitter. It has sort of like a neurotransmitter effect as well, and can actually reduce the excitatory effect and also rebalance a lot of like dopamine, serotonin, these sort of things adjust them and homeostatically regulate a lot of these things. And it's the reason why I think that people like with bipolar, schizophrenia and things like this, when they get onto doing something like taurine, which basically means a carnivore diet, they see a remission in a lot of these symptoms. And in particular, the ones that I've actually been monitoring, the ones that are doing more raw, meat, they're saying I'm getting better results. And I know why they're getting better results. It's the taurine, that they're getting more quantity of taurine from the supermarket meats. That's where the difference lies in the sort of the two groups. The other thing is it has a number of other important effects in a number of other tissues. So in the pancreas, what it does is, if a mother is protein deficient, the child that she will basically have a smaller amount of islet cells and a smaller pancreas. If you then, after the birth, because you can have premature children, you actually give that child taurine supplementation, you can actually restore, actually even surpass the control group. So the control group that was actually just getting the normal nutrition of protein and all that, the one that was actually getting supplemented, which was protein deficient, actually ended up with bigger volume of space of islet cell. That's the actual volume of it and the numbers. It was dramatic, the increase. I mean, compared to the one that was deficient, it was something like nearly 50%. On the other ones, about 20 to 20% plus from memory. So that is dramatic, because we're talking about, we're not talking about here some relative number. We're talking about in absolute terms, the difference between a body organ that actually has a larger size to it, has more islet cells, something that basically is the thing that a lot of people that have got diabetes 1 and diabetes 2 lose. It's the reason why people are seeing these strange effects. Some people are getting better effects than others, coming on to, have got diabetes 2 or diabetes 1 in particular, 1 in this case, and some of them see better results than others. They're both doing carnivore diet, but I suspect one's getting more taurine than the other. Why they're seeing the improvements. So if they were supplementing, they would, because people say, well, Harry, and I said, well, hold on. They may be doing the same thing, but have they been doing it all their life? No. Now, if this person had been birthed from an ancestral mother, a tribal mother, who ate sufficient meat, and then that child was basically breastfed for a number of months, getting large amounts of taurine, which comes in the breast milk, well, that child is basically going to get a good beginning, is going to have far more a better functioning pancreas. So by the time and let's not forget, they're going to have lesser salts on their pancreas compared to modern people through their whole life, because they're on an ancestral diet, on a tribal diet, which has less sugar, even in this interglacial period where we may have some seasonal access to certain types of carbohydrates. Even then, it's a very small amount that these people consume. Primarily, they prioritize animals because that's where the nutrient density is. But people like us, on the other hand, we've started from a very young age being deprived of sufficient protein. And when you deprive a person protein, what you're doing is you're depriving themselves of two other things: leucine, to grow tissue and grow bigger bones and bigger bodies, and also taurine that assists in that, but also has other roles, because leucine may actually be good for muscle protein synthesis, but it won't increase the islet cells.
I was thinking when you were talking about the histamines, and you also said that it helps with detoxification. So one thing that a lot of carnivores do experience is the oxalate dumping. Would it have any effect on that? Yeah. So you want to talk a little bit about that? Just a little bit. We're running out of time.
Okay. Yeah. Now, what happens with oxalate dumping in particular, you will basically burn through sulfur amino acids. That includes methionine, cysteine, and taurine. So you can end up with a subclinical, in particular with taurine, because we only biosynthesize a very small amount. If we're not getting enough from the diet, especially if we're overcooking our meats or they are hung for too long, aged, or that beef jerky, forget it, you're not going to get any. I do love beef jerky, but I just know that I'm not going to get any. I just accept that. But under those circumstances, then you may end up with a subclinical deficiency, and then you can actually end up with electrolyte issues, and you can end up with a lot of things. Your gut not functioning properly, and you're going, I'm getting all these sort of strange reactions. My gut motility is out of whack. I'm sort of constipated, diarrhea, and all that. Well, that's because basically you've depleted your and you can't regulate properly those tissue types anymore because you're deficient in taurine. And yes, and a lot of people do suffer those symptoms with oxalate dumping, and I would say that under those circumstances, I usually put people at least under 4 to 6. It depends on your body size as well. So if you're really, let's say, the average person probably about 4. If you're very tiny, probably about 2. If you're very large, like somebody like Sean Baker, maybe 6, you know what I mean? You'd need a bit more to deal with that sort of thing. So you have to think about volume, because this actually spreads throughout all the cells in your body. And so you still need a certain level within the intracellular space to regulate all these different tissue types. So obviously the larger you are, that's why I love veterinary science, because they look at the animal in terms of its size, what they're going to give it, not this sort of arbitrary RDI shit, sorry for saying that.
That's all right.
Yes,
I agree.
Which is unfortunate, Now, now, I think we've covered that. Now, on the cardiovascular side, it's really important for to basically maintain healthy mitochondria. That's the reason why I started taking it as well. What it does is it actually reduces superoxide in that. It also reduces lactate. So when you go through right down to pyruvate through glycolysis, there you can go in 2 directions. You can either go towards the TCA cycle into the acetyl-CoA, into the actual Krebs cycle, or you can go into lactate. You can produce more lactate as well. Now, obviously, that can go back. They can do 2 things. It either can go back and actually produce more glucose, or it can go through the polyo pathway and actually produce more fructose. It really depends on, a carnivore should technically get enough taurine in their diet to lower blood sugar and regulate it, because it does regulate blood sugar in the system as well. So if you're basically not regulating blood sugar properly as a carnivore, you may be deficient in taurine as well, another element.
Interesting.
If you're generating far too much lactate or having higher levels of uric acid, again, it's probably a taurine deficiency as well. So it is, because it's a master regulator throughout the whole body, it's so critically important. I consider it the Swiss Army knife of the body. That's how I characterize it and call it. Yeah. Because it's regulating all these functions within the body. So now, within the actual neurons in the brain, it actually lowers oxidative stress. It actually will reduce oxidative stress, clean it all up, has an antioxidant role. Now, in terms of glycating effects in the brain, and that's really what we're actually talking about here, is the amount of sugar molecules that are floating freely within the brain, and glycating proteins. So what it can actually do, like if you've got beta amyloid, what beta amyloid can happen with beta amyloid one thing that actually clears beta amyloid is choline. Very important. Acetylcholine comes out of it, but also taurine supports acetylcholine production. But anyway, that's a side issue for another day. But
yeah.
when you glycate beta amyloid, it actually ends up, one, its protein structure misfolds quite severely, but also can't be pulled apart. Now, what taurine does is it removes that glycation off the beta amyloid, which allows then for choline or its precursors to clear it out and other enzymes to clear it out that are choline dependent. And so, in a sense, it is a dementia. So eating meat will reduce, this is my personal opinion, will reduce your possibility for dementia and Alzheimer's. There you go. I said it. Now, if you want to argue with me, I can actually show you mechanistic studies, and I will have more stuff on my, yes, in that regard. Now, it also reduces in the retina. It will actually reduce the sort of, what you get is sugar that actually attaches to the proteins and all that, and actually gummies up the sort of the pathways that actually connect to the brain and within the actual retina itself. Well, what taurine can do is actually lower that glycating effect and clear that out. It actually can improve eye function, retinal function. So it plays an important role there as well. Now, in terms of the Krebs cycle, taurine does, it actually lowers the ROS and the superoxide that's actually being generated by glucose metabolism. So somebody who is diabetic, who has difficulty, oxidizing fats, and you need to transition them, you're still transitioning them to that. I usually get them on much higher doses of taurine to reduce the oxidative damage and stress and effects as their bodies are adjusting to lipolysis, to the ability to actually utilize, and then they can actually bring their levels down. Once things, we don't need to ramp up to very high levels. I don't encourage people to ramp up to massive levels for a long period of time. I usually get people who are diabetics on, I get them off metformin and stuff like that, and basically encourage them to basically go up to 10 grams as they're adjusting their metformin medication. So they need to go to their doctor. Don't do this experiment at home, kiddies. You need to go to your doctor, and you need to basically adjust the dosage of your medication as you're increasing the taurine that will basically normalize your blood glucose levels. So you don't want to basically, go in there and all that. And it's the same thing with blood pressure. I've actually done a video covering blood pressure medications, because if you're still taking medications, taurine is trying to normalize things, all the ions, to basically make sure that they are actually balanced throughout all inside the cells and inside the bloodstream. But if you're taking also blood pressure meds, you're going to be lowering it outside the range that taurine's trying to get to. So you can actually basically end up passing out. We don't want people. So if you're on blood pressure meds, you need to actually reduce them slowly and get them adjusted by your doctor as you increase the taurine levels. And it will lower your blood pressure as well. So, and it will regulate, and you'll see edema go away and stuff like that. I've had people where their parents are not willing to change their diet. They don't want to take blood pressure meds. They end up taking taurine. Their edema goes away, even though they're still eating a kibble diet. Now, it definitely isn't perfect situation, but it's a bit of a biohack for people that are naughty and don't want to change. There are other things like that I haven't covered. There are conditions which are called like calcium overload that can actually cause damage to, like you can actually get an overload of calcium in the actual cells and actually cause damaging effects to the mitochondria by excessive reactive oxygen species and stuff like that. Well, taurine prevents that. So it prevents it from even happening. Forget about, dealing with it. It won't even happen. As I say, a steak a day keeps the mitochondria happy every day. So, that's
Excellent.
the magic of taurine, that it basically will prevent. I know it's corny. Now, the next thing, ion metabolism. Okay. A lot of people complain about hemochromatosis and all that. Well, taurine does its magic here as well. What it does is it actually improves ion metabolism and reduces free ion in the bloodstream. That's the reason why when people go on a carnivore diet and consume more meat, they see a resolution of hemochromatosis, not the other way around. It's the lack of a regulator, an important regulator that a lot of us aren't aware of. As I said, I found some research, it's like this thick in terms of, I could spend my whole life researching and explaining all the different things that it does in the body, that taurine does, and still it'll outlive me before I actually even complete that task. So I'm not even taking it on. But I will, through videos, explain a lot of things that can help people, things that really are important to people in terms of hemochromatosis. Now, also can actually improve anemia. So there's some research that came out of the Gaza Strip in Palestine, and they actually were noticing that a lot of the young girls, obviously because you can't really get much food in there. It's a semi-war zone. There's a lot of children there that are basically protein deficient. And they realised that a lot of the young girls had severe anemia. Well, they started doing some research to see what compounds can improve. And the only thing, even supplemental iron didn't really help. And what they found was that taurine improved iron status, improved a lot of different things in the body, and actually ameliorated or reduced, the condition, anemia, in these young girls. So now the local authorities there that are producing it in one of their labs are providing it to the children of Gaza. So it's actually being used for that purpose. So, I mean, you may have an anemic relative that doesn't want to eat a lot of meat, which is a problem with older people sometimes, or especially if they're plant-based parents, and you may want to help them with a bit of taurine supplementation in that regard. So, well, what can you do? I mean, my mission in life has been to try and help people. I know you can't save everyone. We can't save everyone. But it's basically, I've been a sufferer myself and had a lot of suffering. And for me, it's been very important to basically find ways to help people and come up with actionable solutions, which isn't always easy. Now, I think the two other, now a lot of people, there's another issue that a lot of people complain, especially on a keto diet. They tend to complain that they have a lot of leg cramps and stuff like that. Now, obviously, in some cases, if you consume more meat and salt, you usually resolve that issue. But some people may have an underlying subclinical potassium magnesium deficiency. Now, you're only actually excreting a very small amount. In the amount, like if we eat big enough steaks and all that, we're probably getting enough potassium, like the excretion rate is about 192 milligrams approximately, based on research from humans, which the National Institute of Health have basically, that was an old study that they actually commandeered to see what the excretion rate through feces and urine was per day for humans. And so I would now, and if you're on a carnivore diet as well, you've got the other advantage that basically you don't actually go through as much potassium or magnesium because you're not on a kibble diet, because glucose metabolism actually uses far more potassium and magnesium. So that's another benefit. But you still could have basically been on, a long keto period with low taurine and lost a lot of your electrolytes and have, subclinically, never really been able to restore them properly. Well, there's two ways of doing that. You can either supplement taurine for a period of time, or you can basically start eating more meat, and over a number of months, you will fix that problem. You'll restore that. You'll sort that problem out. Now, taurine will help because it'll actually reduce the excretion rate and actually recycle those back in to the fluids, so they can actually then be pushed back into the cells. So that's one way of going. Or you can basically just eat more meat for a longer period of time and fix up your electrolyte issue in that regard. And you will notice, for me, I used to get a lot of muscle cramps. I mean, in my keto days, I was in pain sometimes. I'd stretch my legs and I'd go, oh, I'd be in absolute agony. And I've never had that problem since going carnivore and adding taurine to it as well. So that problem has gone completely in that regard. I just remembered another thing that I didn't actually talk about earlier with epilepsy. Because it actually reduces, it inhibits, with epilepsy, for instance, what you're actually doing is you're calming the nervous system. Taurine calms the nervous system. It's through GABA A primarily, but through a number of other pathways. I can't even remember them all. It's a while that I read that literature. That's why I just remembered it. And it actually can reduce, not only inhibit, the sort of the pathways that actually initiate seizures, but actually just shut them off in a sense. We still don't understand. We know that it does, so we can actually induce seizures in rats and then basically give them taurine, and it just stops it immediately. But we don't know the exact mechanism. So we know mechanistically we can see that, cause and effect. Cause you a seizure, I give you basically taurine, it stops the seizure. But we don't still understand exactly how it's happening.
Is that immediate?
They know that there is a certain it sort of happens quite quickly. Not like instantaneous, but it does happen, because you still need to saturate the tissue with taurine to get it into, because it does cross the blood-brain barrier, but it takes a bit of time from the gut to the blood-brain barrier to cross and all that to happen. But once it actually gets past the blood-brain barrier and into the actual brain, then it sort of happens. Then these neurotransmitters are influenced and regulated in this way by taurine, and it just really just prevents these epileptic seizures. Now that is in a rat model. But I'm not claiming that it
so
basically
if you
will work the same way in a human.
Taurine, would that prevent any fits from happening?
And it may be, look, it may be the ancestral. If we look at I actually had a conversation with a mate of mine. This is in Hobart, and we were talking about it. I don't know. I need to catch up with him and find out exactly, because he was talking about a friend of an acquaintance that he knew and was going to mention it about supplementing with taurine to deal with the seizures that person was suffering. So I don't know what's happened. I just really need to catch up. I forgot all about it. So, but it seems that, and I don't even remember the dosage, so I can't even give you a dosage in that regard. I think I recommended to him a very high dose, 8 plus, grams, in that regard. But I did actually ask him, is he taking lithium? This is another important thing. What taurine does is it has an ability to hold on, because it's an osmolyte and regulates all the minerals in the body. And this is an important thing, for mineral homeostasis, whether it's copper, calcium, iron, whatever, for mineral homeostasis, taurine plays an important role. This is why people on a carnivore diet get better mineral management, you could say, in the body. That's another thing that it does, because of its regulatory osmolytic effect. But when it with lithium, it can concentrate it. That means it can hold on to lithium and not excrete it out of the kidneys. So if you are taking lithium medication, you need to lower your lithium levels, get your doctor to adjust lower your lithium levels in order to take more taurine. Now, taurine can do the same thing that lithium does in high doses. It will actually calm you down. It works on the same pathways. That's why it interacts with lithium. So you've got to make a choice. It's either lithium or meat. It's one of the two. And it's the same thing that Amber O'Hearn, I think she was taking lithium, and she doesn't take lithium anymore. And she tends to eat more meat and even some raw meat. So she's probably getting enough taurine. But it took her a while, and that would have meant it would have taken her some time to saturate her tissue. That's why I usually get people to saturate their tissue for a couple of months with higher doses, and then once they've saturated their tissue, because they've not been ancestral. None of us have had the diet where our bodies have got less senescence, less damage, less any of these problems, and so our requirements are would have been much lower as an ancestral person. So we would have got enough from meat, and also because it's fresh meat, so it's freshly slaughtered. You've cunted the animal. It's got a lot of its fluids, and you actually look at old videos of Inuit women, sitting there, and if you look at the amount of water that when you freshly slaughter an animal, a lot of the water that comes out, the water content. There's a lot of taurine in that. They used to take little cups and drink it all. You're getting not only electrolytes that most people focus on, but you're getting heaps and heaps of taurine. You're getting multiple grams with each cup. So that's the difference, of ancestral. I look at ancestral, sort of the way they approach things, and I realise that we do things very differently. We call ourselves carnivores, but really we're nothing like the ancestral way of living in that regard. So because of the way we treat food and the way we process it and stuff like that, we lose a lot of things in that regard.
Can we take too much taurine? And what happens if we do?
The literature doesn't actually explain an upper limit. Anywhere in the literature, I have not seen an upper limit. The highest within human physiology that has been experimented for a number of months without any negative effects has been 10 grams. In rats, the equivalent for rats, that is, has been 28 grams per day equivalent for somebody who's, let's say, 70 kilos, which is the average sort of size of a person, average height of person. And so that's
without side effects.
And a number of other and without any side effects. Now, there is a small group of people, it's a very minute group of people that can bioaccumulate quite a lot of sulfur. So, but it's only it's a minuscule amount, one in a hundreds of thousands or a million. I can't even remember the exact number. It's a very small group that have got certain genetics that tend to basically, for whatever reason, it's some mutation, and they tend to hold on to sulfur, like it's the end of the world. And those people can actually end up with too much sulfur build up in their body. So those, unless you've got symptoms like nausea and stuff like that, if you start having, like you're taking high dose and you start having a lot of nausea and all that, maybe pull back a bit. If you're not, don't worry about it. There is a bit of a biohack even with that, when some people go, okay, I've got a condition like that, but on the other hand, I need to fix my gallbladder. So how am I going to do this? Well, then I usually encourage that they use choline supplementation. You can only get so much from eggs, but, we want to go to the higher doses of choline, a couple of grams, and that will methylate away the excess out of the system. So it'll actually lower down the sulfur levels. And also for people that do retain a lot of sulfur for whatever reason, choline is a good way of actually methylating away and reducing your levels of sulfur buildup in your body. So it's a small amount of people. I've known about it from other naturopathic doctors that have talked about it, but I haven't really researched it myself because it's such a small, tiny group to go really to spend the time. Probably at some point in time I will look into it, but not at this stage in that regard.
So can you share the name of your YouTube channel with everyone who's watching, in case they are not there already?
Well, it's just under my name, Harry Serpanos. So if people just Google Harry Serpanos, it's my name, and I call it No BS because basically, I'll even correct myself, and I have on 2 occasions corrected myself when I've had a bit of a boo-boo.
So Harry has a lot of stuff on his channel, and it all goes into a lot of detail about everything. So if you want to know anything in detail, whatever vitamins, minerals, whatever it is, then Harry's channel is the way to go, and you just need to go there, subscribe to it, binge watch all his videos, and you will be a pro as well. Harry, thank you so much for coming on.
Can I say one
quickly?
Thing? Can I say one thing before
Yes.
I go? Okay.
Yeah.
I do in the descriptions of all my videos, I do provide all links to all the research and all the stuff that's shown in those videos. So if people want to check them out themselves, and if they have any comments, they can put comments in the comments area. If they want to correct me or they want to basically ask further questions to things that they didn't understand, I'm easy in that regard. Thanks, Pim, for inviting me.